Maria Roginska. Well, I'm doing sociological research into science and religion. I always thought that science and religion are two the most important things. And I was always interested in these big questions. So I was hoping actually to ask my scientists with whom I had interviews later about these big questions. Discovered there is imagination, or as I call it, imaginary. This imagination is sometimes crucial because I met a lot of people among scientists as well who say, well, I lost my faith because the image of God is not satisfactory for me. If I were a believer, I would choose another one, more subtle, right? So I think that actually some sensibility, which I use this term in my research, sensibility, which is a sense or a feeling which is related to our experience of life in some social and natural universe, which sort of helps us to define what image is acceptable or not. So this sensibility is changing, and people just feel that they do not accept some images, and some they do. I studied Polish and Ukrainian natural scientists, physicists, and biologists. I discovered that actually, when they imagine, yes, sometimes they don't even notice that they imagine, but they imagine in a very specific way. I mean, Poles were different from Ukrainians. I could see that actually in Poland it's quite sort of understandable. This is some Catholic background, and their imaginary was dualistic. So they would talk about God who is invisible, who is transcendental. While Ukrainians were mysterious, they talked about something which is more complicated. It was about unity of everything, interconnectedness. And yes, I discovered these three main patterns. One was the mind, which was some agency which was controlling the world, a rational agency, but they anyway described this in immanent material or quasi-material terms. What I discovered here in this INSBS grant is I did some additional interviews, now with post-Soviet people, with Lithuanians and Ukrainians. I thought that Lithuanians, I remind you, it's a Catholic country as well, would be like Poles, but they weren't. And this was a surprise. This was just so amazing, because they were like Ukrainians. While the Soviet case is very, very special, was because people who were born early enough, say in 40s, they experienced all different changes, starting from this forced secularization, and then of collapse of the Soviet Union, right, and new national churches and so on. So some of them were educated or raised in the families in some religious faith, some not. Some in Catholic Lithuania, some in Orthodox Ukraine. But they all lost this, almost all, this institutional faith. And they chose this what I call alternative imaginary. So I looked at the biographies of these oldest professors, and one of the answer I found was that the Soviet Union created sort of ambivalent, confused, what I call confused normativity. People had to lead double life. They have to pretend in the families, with the neighbors. The state gave you one ontological narrative, while the family another. So some of the scientists from the very beginning had to base their deepest beliefs and views on science. They based their very privatized, special, strange, creative, religious worldviews on science.